Umlen and Ablat Gemara. We are up to the Lamed Gimel on an Aleph, second line from the top, the two dots. So the Mishnah said a number of differences between commercial disputes or commercial courts versus, capital crime courts. And one of the differences is that in a Dini Mominus, you can always, they realize they made a mistake even after the psak, they can reverse that psak. It doesn't matter whether now they're going to, before they found the person liable and now they're saying that he doesn't have to pay, or the converse. They said before that he has to pay, now he says he doesn't have to pay. But when they contrast this with Dini Nefoshes, Dini Nefoshes, or the Bezin made a sentence. If the sentence was that the person is found guilty, and then they realized they made an error and they said we want to change it, they can. But they found the person innocent, and now they realized they made a mistake and they want to find the person guilty, they can't. Lahavda, like double jeopardy. Once you found the person innocent, you cannot then change your mind, even if new evidence comes up. You can't change in negotiable. You cannot change your mind. So now the Gemara will discuss that in more detail. Dine Mamas Machzidin, our Mishnah says you can reverse the halacha. I'm going to ask you a question from a Mishnah B'chaydes where it seems to say punkt verkehrt. It seems to be saying just the opposite. That once you give a psak, a certain time you cannot change your mind, and the only question is, are the judges responsible to compensate the person for causing the person damage when they made an error? That's the discussion. But it seems like the din is irreversible, because it's reversible. Then why pay anything? Just reverse the halacha, just reverse your sentence. The fact that we have a discussion whether the judges have to reimburse the person or not means that the din you paskin is final. You cannot reverse that. The question is only, are you responsible for making an innocent mistake? Says the Gemara, says the meaning we learned, Donna Sadin. The Bezin made a judgment. Zika Sachayev. They said the person who really was responsible. They said, you know what? They're not responsible. Or Chiyav Sazakai, or somebody really should have been innocent, and they said that you have to pay. Times Atoy, something that was Toy, they by mistake said it was Tommy. Or Tias Atomy, something which was Tommy by mistake. They said no problem, it's Toy. Masha Osa Osa. The sentence remains, even though it was an error. But Vishalim basic, the judge has to compensate them. Now, there's two levels of judges. One is called a yachid, a judge that's a mumche, and one is a judge that's not a mumche. According to Taisus, there are three levels. There's an ordinary judge, not a mumche, and a mumche with smicha. Now, bottom line is, a mumche means someone, there's a big machlekes to show what it means, but generally speaking, we say, gomir v'savir, knows how to learn, understands. Even things he didn't learn, right away understands what it should be, the way, he knows how to think, has a good head on his shoulders, and sees things correctly. Not a mumche is somebody, machlekes, what that means. Some say gomir v'loy savir, some say even loy gomir v'loy savir. Either they know how to learn, but they don't have such a straight head, and they cannot necessarily figure out things that they haven't really learned yet themselves, what it should be, because they haven't covered it. That's not a mumche. And the difference, there'll be a difference whether they have to compensate the people that they erred against, they made a mistake against, whether they have to compensate them or not. Some say that mumche is only if they got permission. It's not enough to be a big Talmud Chacham. You also need permission from the Reish Galusa if you're in exile, or some say permission from the king, the government, or as a throw permission from the Nasi, or you have permission to paskin. And according to Taisa, there's a higher grade called smicha. If you have smicha, the dinim are totally different. Then you're always impugned. In other words, the question is, do you have an indemnity or not for making mistakes? Amr Yosef, like Kasha. Kan bin mumche, our Mishnah talks about a mumche can change his mind. A mumche can say, no, I rescind my din, because we respect that this person knows how to learn, and if he says he made a mistake, he made a mistake, and the first time was wrong, and the second time was right. But kan b'shein a mumche. If the person is not a mumche, and he said, you know what, I'm changing my mind, the person can say, if you're not a mumche, how do I know the second time is the right one? Maybe your first understanding was right. Well, I'm not going to listen to you, because maybe your first is right. Says the Gemara. Okay, says the Gemara here. So right now we're saying that our Mishnah said that you can change the psak if Bezin really made a mistake, and we had a Mishnah that says you cannot change the psak; you actually have to pay out. So we're saying that our Mishnah is talking about a mumche, and a mumche can change his mind, and we trust that the second time he's right. And the Mishnah is about not a mumche, and therefore we don't trust necessarily that the second time is any better than the first time. Says the Gemara of a mumcha marzidin. You're telling me that by mumcha we could change our mind. In that very Mishnah B'chayres, it says the difference between a mumcha and a non-mumcha is whether you have to compensate. A non-mumcha has to compensate the litigants if you made a mistake, and the mumcha does not, which means that even a mumcha is irreversible. Because if it's reversible, why are you discussing compensation? So then the question goes back. It seems that even a mumcha, the din is irreversible. It's only a question whether you compensate or not. So how come our mission says that you can change your mind? You're part of paying, which means, but your din remains steadfast. So Nachar comes along and says, you know when our Mishnah says you can change your mind? You cannot change your mind. Like the Gemara B'chayres, the question is only whether you have to reimburse them or not. Our Mishnah says you can change your mind. Talking about there's a higher court, or there's someone there that's godol mimenu b'chachma b'minyan, which is an expression we use if one bezin says something, another bezin later on, generation later wants to reverse it. So godol mimenu b'chachma b'minyan. That's very difficult to understand what exactly means b'minyan. Minyan means number. A bezin is made up of 3 people. You can't have more than 3 people. What mean godol mimenu b'chachma b'minyan? So in the Rishonim, there are different opinions. One opinion in Rishonim is he's older. Yeah, so we can say, and what's older means more experience, partial experience. Others say minyan means the Talmidim. You have the Sanhedrin Daf Paskins. It means that you have more Talmidim than the other guy, because when you learn with Talmidim, you sort it out in your mind as well better. You have a clearer head. If you have more Talmidim, you have more questions, more interaction. So this bezin might have might get to the actual din more than the other bezin. Then there's a whole debate. What happens if one bezin is more in Chochmah, the other bezin is more in Minyan? Which overrides what? And some of the Pasuk say Minyan overrides, because if you learn Minyan is Talmidim. When you have a number of Talmidim, it brings out, I guess, like the Gemara Bavli, it brings out more the true psak, the final psak. Okay, so Al Mishnah is talking about there's a higher court. They're the ones who overturn your din, not you overturn your own din. They do it for you. And can't change the melech chachmin. Here you have to do it yourself. You cannot reverse your own halacha. I know the second time is better than the first time. That's the Rav Nachman's view. Rav Sheshes comes along and says no. Now this is very important. This is one of the longest shachs in Shulchan Aruch. Kan shetor b'dvar kan shetor b'shikol das. Depends what your mistake is. If your error is in a dvar mishnah, which means it's a clear mishnah, you should have known it. So your psak is not a psak. It's not a psak in the first place. Reversible. That's our Mishnah here. If it's shikol das means it's not clear one way or another. But if you would have learned the Gemara properly, you would see that the Gemara is sort of leaning in this direction here. Or the Rambam uses the expression, it's already in a spashit that this is how people behave. But others try to say that this is how from the Gemara's questions or other places the Gemara quotes only one part of it, so you can see the Gemara's attitude is that should be the halacha, but the Gemara never ruled it. So then that's called shikol das, weighing up. Here it makes a difference whether you're a mumcha or not. And why should it be a difference? If you're not a mumcha, the guy can argue. It's shikol das. Why do you think your second shikol das is any better than your first one? Maybe the first approach was the right one, not the second one. It's not clear. So one day you woke up this way, tomorrow goes, and in a week from now you'll think again like the first one. I don't have to listen to you. You change your mind. But if you're a mumcha, then we trust that if he reevaluated the situation and he came to this conclusion that this is probably the right one. The Gemara will explain in a minute what shikol das. What's an example of shikol das? Says the Gemara, if you made a mistake in Dvar Mishnah, then you go back. You made a mistake in shikol das, you don't have to go back at all. So Amish are talking about Dvar Mishnah, therefore you reverse it, and they're talking about Torah b'shikol das, and therefore it's irreversible. But what if you're not a mumcha? You have to compensate them for your mistake because you shouldn't realize the Gemara generally is leaning in that direction. But if it's you're a mumcha, then you don't have to compensate. And Rashi says a fascinating thing. Why doesn't a mumcha have to compensate? So Rashi says, very interesting, near the top of the page, Rashi says in the first narrow lines, the kivan the mumchahu, because this guy is an expert, mazla bishadahu gavra, godam leina mitzvah. You know why this Muchas had the wrong approach and he ruled when he should have ruled the other way? It's your fault. The defendant's fault. It's your bad mazel. What approach? Well, he says, defendant, that's his bad mazel. No, hashgacha pratis. That the dayan, because the Eibishter is there, the Yatzav Deshmaya, and the Eibishter made, because he's a Mumcha, you can say that this is the Eibishter leading him rather than his own folly. third narrow line. Okay, back to the Gemara. Ravina said to Ravashi, what's the example of a Torah b'shikla das? That's right. What's the example taught by Mishnah? Look, if you take it literally, it means only a Mishnah. What about Gemara? If a Gemara rules something and you went against the Gemara, is that considered Torah by Mishnah that's reversible? I feel Torah by Rabbi. You didn't know Brisa. Brisa already, and not everyone's familiar with all the Brises, and it wasn't really examined as thoroughly. Rebbe invited all the Rabbonim, they sat inside. This is Brisa outside. So therefore, is that also something that you have to know? Yes. Even that's why you find many times the Moraim have an opinion, and then somebody comes along and quotes the Brises Raket, and they would say, "Oh, Tanya, the Brises." I retract what I said. I feel with Rabbi Shmuel. What about Gemara? Rabbi Shmuel, the great luminaries. Yeah. So then Ravina said, Rabashi, it's the last generation of Meroim. Afilu b'didi v'didach, me and you. Now Ravina was from Eretz Yisrael, and he joined Ravashi, and that's why now look at him. They joined Ravashi, and they have the best of Eretz Yisrael, the best of Babel joined together and made the Shas. So Afilu b'didi v'didach, if somebody doesn't know our Gemara, Amale Otu Anan Katli Kani Bagman, are we just famous saying? Are we just cutters of reeds in a swamp? Is that all we are? We're garnished. We're also something. Interesting discussion here. So he said, Anan, Anan. That's what it. We're also somebody now. In Torah Mishnah, Machlek is the Rishonim. What about if you don't know the Goinim? Then what? In the famous Rosh, what about the Rishonim? If you paskin against the Rishonim, and then we go again. What about Shulchan Aruch? There's a beautiful Prima Godim in the Hagdama of Prima Godim. In Klolim of Choshen Mishpat. He has over there a very interesting thing. He says, you always go to the later poskim because we knew the early ones. He says, because there's a big shakbatan, he says, even if the later posik is a yachid and the earlier poskim is a rabbin, the halach will be like the yachid, perhaps, because he knew what the rabbin said, and yet he paskas differently. So it's not a yachid against the rabbin, and as long as he has, strong rayas to say what he says. Then the Chavas Yoyer, interesting, the end of the Chavas Yoyer talks about this Barichas, and he says there that even now that we have a Shulchan Aruch, now that we have a Shulchan Aruch, that's it. Where they don't argue, it's final, you cannot come along and argue. But he says over there that if the Shach argues with the Sameh, if you rule like the Sameh, you're a Tobad Mishnah. You have to follow the Shach, which is interesting because they're more or less the same time period. Nevertheless, he says, the Shach and the Sameh, it's a Tobad Mishnah. Then they write, and Al Zebra writes, what? I don't know that. I don't remember. In Poland and Khmelnytsky. Could be, but usually if it's so close to each other. Okay, your Smab is older. No, it's not as much older. It's not as a Talmud Ramah. A little bit, you're older. But then, Al Rebbe writes about the Meiri. So they write, if the Goinim, they talk about the Goinim, the same logic in the Shainim, if the Shulchan Aruch paskins one way, because they didn't have the manuscript they didn't know the opinion of a Rishon that generally they respect. Suddenly there's a rush that we didn't know about. And that's the famous debate about the sefer called Shaila Shubas Sami Rosh. There's a big debate. It was written by the Rosh, written by a Maskell, who may believe he was the Rosh, and big argument whether you do quote him, you don't quote him, and whether you Pascal him as the Rosh. But let's say if it would be the Rosh and was found many years later. The Alter Rebbe says they didn't know the media. Had they known the shit of the media, they would have changed it. You're allowed to say that this is not. I'm not going against Acharain because Shulchan Aruch halachic basroi from Abaye and Rabban onward, the famous Marik. From Abaye and Rabban onward, we go like to Asroi. If what do you call it? If they didn't have it, it's no longer considered. And if you can make an assessment that had they known about this particular opinion, they themselves might have ruled differently. You have a right to go back then. And that's why the famous, Ramosha Feinstein, the Sefer Minor Leaguers, came out of there against Ramosha, because Ramosha Feinstein, and he's not the only one, would sometimes argue with Rishonim. and the Minor Leaguers goes through every single tshuva of Ramosha, where he says, look at Rashi, look at this, look at that, and this and that, to say that, you can't argue against the Rishonim unless you have strong ground. And the question is, can you? If you have strong ground, that's a svara. You have to have a posting that says this way and so on. So, interesting discussion. Now, and I will come back to this because I'll tell you why the shach is so long and why there's so many. It's one of the most complicated halachas, as we'll see in a minute. The responsibility of judges. What's considered shikol das? Weighing up in the mind. I'm going to going today to know you. There were two tonight. They're arguing with each other. Well, each one here is like a mav. We don't rule the halacha. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch itself, we have a few exceptions where the Shulchan Aruch says we don't paskin. Like in Hilchot Tzitzis, whether at night clothes have to wear tzitzis, an argument that I'm on the rush. And Shulchan Aruch says we don't paskin. Which one is right? We have a few places, or by Flag Mincha, we have few places that we don't paskin. Shulchan Aruch doesn't make a ruling. So there's no ruling. Or in the Gemara says, then do whatever you do. The ikra, and it happened. But if you follow the gang of the Gemara, the flow, it seemed like the Gemara is leaning the other direction. Like all the Toshmas, to bring a proof for supporting one opinion versus the other opinion. So you get the feeling that the Gemara really wants to support this Amora versus that Amora. That's called Shikol Das. So you should have paskin like the flow of the Gemara, but you made a mistake and you paskin the other way. In this way, you cannot rescind your halacha because this person can say, like the famous thing of Kimli, I follow this other pasuk. So this person can say, how do I know that your second way is better than your first way if you're not a mumcha? If you're a mumcha, we trust your second way is a better approach, and therefore you can rescind your halacha. But if you're not therefore you don't have to pay anything else. But if you're not a mumcha, you cannot change your mind and you have to compensate. It's a simple question. So you come along and you say that a Tobit Mishnah you can change your mind, and Tov Shikodas you cannot change your mind. So this Mishnah is talking about you made a mistake in Shikodas. Therefore, you have to depends on your not whether you have to compensate. Our Mishnah says that you could change your mind. Talking about Tobit Mishnah. Let me ask you a question. We learned of Sheishes Maisa Bepara Shenitla Aimshala. This Egyptian they used to raise these animals and they were very very healthy and good stock. And when they sold it abroad, they want to make sure they don't have competition from abroad, so they would take out the womb. So the animals you cannot impregnate animals and start your own stock, your own flock in another country. They want to make sure that they keep the business here, maintain the monopoly on this particular animal. Now the question is whether the animal's treif now. If they took the womb out. So I said, but that's treif. Now we'll see later. He himself gave it to the dogs. Right now we're not so particular. We just say maybe the owner of this animal fed it to dogs because it's treif. Then you realize it's a mistake. Because and they said nothing. It's kosher. It's not treif. You know why? Because we have a few places in Shas. That Tudas Haraifa said, and he was a doctor. He knew his stuff there, and he said, "Ain't para the chazir yaitz Alexander from Mitzrayim." There's no bull or chazir that leaves Alexandria from Mitzrayim abroad. And look in they want to make sure that they can maintain a monopoly, so they take out the boom. They don't want to have competition. Oh, I'm going to Tarfin. I made a mistake. I passed him this treif, and now it became treif. Tarfin, you got to take your chamer to the market and sell it because you're going to have to compensate. That's what Tarfin said. I'm going to keep it. Said to him, don't worry about it. Why? Here we add a word mumche lerabim. Before we said mumche. So the big discussion in the Rishonim whether mumche lerabim means accepted to everybody that you're being an expert is the same thing, or this is something new, or you have to remove it from the gifts of the Gemara, and so on. Because and the Bach brings you call mumche lebezin. In other words, you don't have to be a mumche lerabim that everybody accepts you to be the world expert. Now, the simple question is very simple. You, Rav Sheshet, just said that if it's a Torah by Mishnah, there's no psak. So what's up Tarfin worried about? He didn't make up psak here at all. Because it's a Meferish Mishnah, not just this Torah Zoraifim. The means a lemon Torah Mishnah, but Torah Mishnah Chayzer, because it's a Meferish Mishnah that says, as we'll see, that says Mishnah clearly that if you take not lame, it's not treif. How's that help? Okay, let's say he's Torah Mishnah and there's no psak, but he caused the guy a loss because he paskin so and he caused the guy a loss. That falls under the category of grama. That falls under the category which I caused you a loss. I'll have to pay for that. Traces wants to argue that it's more than grama. It's garmi. Remember Rashi throughout Shas holds there's no distinction between grama and garmi. A cause is the cause. There's no levels of causes. But Taisis and many Rishonim hold that there are different degrees in Rabban and Gami. There are different degrees of causes. If it's a direct cause, an indirect cause, and a Gami, this is much stronger than just a cause. Because of you, you told him that it's all right, or you told him it's not all right, and therefore he went and he fed it to the dogs. Nevertheless, the Taisis says this Gemara follows the view of Rabban, not Rameir, that you don't follow Gami, even though in Halacha we pass like Rameir. Now, so Gemara says that's not a kasha of Sheshes. Rabbi Kiva meant both. He wanted to assuage, he wanted to calm down Reb Tarfon. He said, "Don't worry, don't fret. First of all, Torah Mishnah. First of all, it's against the Mishnah. It's not an psak. That's a bit embarrassing to tell Reb Tarfon you meant against the Mishnah. So he doesn't sort of say that. It's just implied in his message. And the Torah you can always rescind. But even if you want to argue that you didn't, let's say there's no such Mishnah. Even if you want to argue, let's say there's no such Mishnah. You still don't have to fret. You know why? You're a Tav b'shikol das. Mumche lebezna mumche ramata v'chol mumche ram pat mushalom. But a mumche doesn't have to pay. So it's not a question of sheshes. Comes along, I don't understand. I don't understand Amnun's question originally. Rabbi Amnun's question was, why was Reb Tarfon worried that he has to pay? He's a Talmud Mishnah, right? And you said Mishnah, there's no psak. But the difference, if you see what happened, it wasn't a papa made a psak, and he was a cause. The papa picked up this animal and gave it to the dogs. So you can't rescind the psak. Well, what helps? What do you mean? The animal's kosher, and where is it? You gave it to the dogs to eat. It's not around. It's not existing anymore. And we're not even talking right now about who did it. The fact is that the animal is no longer here. How can you reverse the psak? You have to have the animal here and say, okay, that was the animal's kosher. So what was Amnun's question? And that's why the Papa was worried. Even the Talmud Mishnah, but it can't be chayzit here. It's impossible. But he goes, most of Amnun of Sheiches, was eaten. Right now, we're not interested who gave it to eat. It's irrelevant. It's not around anymore. But less than a tether. How can you reverse your psak? This is what Rav Amnuna was asking Rav Sheshes. If you tell me the halach is that if you make a mistake in the Mishnah, you still cannot rescind. There's no difference in that our Mishnah, that's right, the Mishnah is holding in all instances. A psak is irreversible. It's what's it possible, it's irreversible. The alma comes, that means the psak is there. Therefore, the Reb Tarfon is worried. That's Reb Tarfon is worried. If he caused a loss, he has to pay. Don't worry, because you're a mumche. And mumche lebez not interesting. Here it says in bezin. Mumche bez not you don't have to pay. Eliyam, if you can tell me if you can tell me the rule generally is if you made a mistake against the Mishnah, it's not a psak. What do you mean chayis? Means it's not a psak. If it's not a psak, then Rabbi Kiva should have said lay. Rabbi Kiva should have said, look, since if the animal would have been present, it's not a psak. So even though the animal is not present anymore, you didn't paskin. You didn't do anything here. You were just a grumman. Now it's even less than gami in a way, because it's not like you made a psak and the guy followed the psak. There is no psak. You're against the Mishnah. So what are you worried about? That's what he should have told him. Nothing to do with shikol hadas. It's irrelevant. Why did we talk about shikol hadas? Have a part of the dinner, lav dinner. If the part would be in existence right now, then your psak is not a psak. But like klum of it, you didn't do anything. So hashanam klum of it. So even though the animal was fed to the dogs, but your psak was never a psak. So you're not even a gami. So you cause a loss. You're potter. So that's the discussion. There comes Rav Chizda, and Rav Chizda is actually quoted in the Gemara always, even though the Gemara here in a way repudiates Rav Chizda, as we'll see. So the Gemara sort of says the whole idea of shikol hadas. Because the Gemara says shikol hadas, you look at the flow of the Gemara. Here the Gemara completely you'll see the Gemara the Malish is Rav Chizda's word. Only someone else comes up with a little different answer. And then throughout Shas we continue with Rav Chizda. So shikol hadas is not so simple, not so straightforward. That you could make mistakes in shikol hadas. If you only learn this Gemara here, you might come to the conclusion maybe Rav Chizda is wrong. We have it all over Shas. We talk about nos as we see. What did Rav Chizda say? He said it's a difference. You know the difference between our Mishnah and the Braisa there? Every Mishnah in B'chaydos. Our Mishnah here is talking about you gave up psak. You gave up psak, and the guy on his own did whatever he did. The B'chaydos is talking about that you then went ahead and implemented your psak. You wanted to make sure that they appreciate what you're saying. So you went and you took this animal and you gave it to the dogs to eat. And that's the difference. No, you're bezin. The whole bezin. No, they took it. Nosav and Nosan b'yad. Not for they did it. The shaita, it doesn't matter who, somebody in the business. Here is talking about that you went personally, then what you did, and it's too late. It's irreversible. And here you just instructed the Baldin, hey, you better pay this guy money, or you better do this and this. And the Baldin is the one who did it on his own. Then you reverse the. Then you can reverse the. No, but zik is a chayiv, a chayiv is a zakai. It's irreversible if you the one who went to the leiva, took the money from him, and handed it over to the mal. Or the leiva put the money in the trust over there before the bezdin, and you took that money personally, you gave it to the malva. The halacha is irreversible. But if you just said you chayiv atalitin, you have to pay him, then it's reversible. So the Gemara, okay, let's go through the case now. It says over here, it says donas adin, it says zikas a chayiv and chiyivas a zakai. Either you told somebody who has to pay, you don't have to pay, or you told somebody you didn't have to pay, you have to pay. Now you're telling me the only time this mission is irreversible. The question is compensation. Now depends if you're mumcha, not mumcha. Now, in the case of chiyivas a zakai, very simple. What do you mean nasiv and not miyad? I went to the borrower. I said, sorry, you lost the case. You say you paid up. We don't believe you. You have to pay. I took your money and I handed it over to the mal. But in the case where I said you don't have to pay, what did I do? I did nothing. And yet it says it's irreversible. And you said the only time it's irreversible is if it's nasim b'yad. What did I do over here? Ask the Gemara. He took it physically, the money, brought it over. El zik is a chayiv. But if it's zik, I tell the guy, he's saying you're guilty. I'm saying you're innocent. Where's the nasim b'yad over here? What do you do? The Amalei, what answers? Could the Amalei poterat? Sorry, the most question. Amalei poterat, but not necessarily he didn't do anything. So why is it reversible? Answers the Gemara. Kivan the Amma poterata. Since he says you are potter, so now you can keep your money. It's as if I handed it back into your pocket. It's kemoishin notel v'nasam b'yadam. It's just like I was personally intervened, I was involved, and so now the Gemara has a problem. Because in our Mishnah, the Mishnah makes a distinction between din and mamonas and the fashes. Our Mishnah says din and mamonas, both ways, bein l'schus, bein l'chayva, it's reversible, and din and fashes, it's not reversible. So you're telling me that the moment you say you are potter is as if I gave it to you, I did something here. And our Mishnah says that it's reversible. And by din and fashes, it's not reversible. So let's see how that works. So elamasnisi in our Mishnah, the tani din and mamonas marzided. It's reversible. When is it reversible? You tell me right now. When is it reversible? Only if you did not personally get involved. But that's the only time you tell me it's reversible. You did nothing. Okay, so tell me pshat in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says bein l'schus bein l'chayva. But if you want to change the schus, you want to change the chayva. If you want to change to chayva, what does that mean? That I said you don't have to pay. But you just said that if I say you don't have to pay, it's as if I physically handed the money over to you. So how can our Mishnah say it's reversible? You just said that if you're not it's irreversible. And our Mishnah said by din mamonas, it's always reversible. Bein l'schus, bein l'chayva. You want to change it to schus or you want to change it to chayva? How can you change it to chayva? It means initially I said that you don't have to pay, which according to you, that's nasiv and nasiv b'yad. So how can Mishnah say it's reversible? Okay, you want to change it to schus, I understand. I said to you, you're guilty to pay. But I didn't. You paid on your own. I didn't make you pay. So that's okay. It's reversible. I did not get involved personally. The Mishnah said you can also reverse it in the case where you change it from schus to chayv. First he said you're potter, and then he says, okay, now I want you to pay. No, but you said that's irreversible. You said the moment you said potter, it says you hand it over. So the Gemara says you misunderstood our Mishnah. You thought bein l'schus, bein l'chayva is two examples. Either you want to change to schus, you want to say the guy now is innocent before he's so guilty, or you want to change another way. I'm learning it's one thing, because by din mamonas is different than other cases. Din mamonas, whatever you find one person innocent, another person, then one person's schus, automatically the other person's chayv. If the borrower doesn't have to pay, then the malva loses out. If the malva receives his money, the borrower loses out. And that's what the Mishnah means. It's not bein l'schus bein l'chayva, two separate cases. You want to change it to schus, which now is a chayv for the other person. In other words, first you said to the borrower, you got to pay, and the borrower then paid, and you found him l'chayv, and now you want to change it to schus. That's the only case the Mishnah is talking about. But why is the Mishnah called it l'chayv? Because at the same time, when you say to the borrower, no, actually you don't have to pay, you get your money back. Now the lender lost out. So that's what it means. A schus, which turns out to be a chayv. And that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, that even though you're hurting somebody with this change of plan, the change of your verdict, it's all right. Says the Gemara, Chodak Tani. This is how you learn the Mishnah. It's one case. Din, not two cases. Din mominus. You know when you can reverse your halacha? Only when you didn't personally intervene. When didn't you personally intervene? When initially you said, go pay, and you paid on your own. I didn't make you pay. And now I'm changing my mind. You don't have to, you didn't have to pay. Get your money back. Okay, that you can reverse because I wasn't involved. So why does the Mishnah also say l'chayva? L'schus shehi chayva. It's a schus which turns out to be it's harming somebody else. And the chiddush is that even though I'm reversing the halacha and I'm going to hurt somebody else now, I'm allowed to do that.
Someone's always going to pay out.
But I wasn't personally involved. Our problem is he gets his money back, but I didn't take the money away from you to give it to him. You paid on your own. When I passed him, when the bezin passed him, Reuben, you owe Shimon $100. Sorry, you owe him $100. So Reuben went to his house and gave him a check of $100. So who did it? Reuben did it. So the din is, if I did him I can reverse the halacha because I wasn't involved personally, so I can reverse the halacha. But if we would have passed him, Reuben, you don't have to pay the money. So we just answered before that at the moment we say the money is as if I took the money and I put it in your pocket. That I cannot change. That halacha cannot change. So when the Mishnah says bein l'schus bein l'chayva, the Mishnah meant was that I can change. First I said Reuben pay the money to Shimon, right? And now I'm saying Reuben get your money back. And at the same time I'm hurting now Shimon. You can do that. Okay, that's how we answer. Gemara has a problem. So the Mishnah contrasts this with din nefashos, but by din nefashos this can't be. And in other words, by din nefashos, since you're harming somebody else, you can't do that. Where do you find by din nefashos capital? What din nefashos? You're mechal Shabbos. Okay, before you said you're guilty, and now we're saying you're innocent. Seems to be that what the Mishnah said. The moment you can do that, even though I'm harming somebody else, but din nefashos you can't. Who am I harming if I say you're innocent? I'm committed adultery as a married woman. First we said you committed adultery, you're chayiv chenek, and now we say that you're potter. Who are we harming? So what's the contrast there? If you learned we learned before is on his own, chayiv is on his own. Before we found the guy innocent, chil Shabbos, now we change our mind. Or before we found him guilty, fine. But now you tell me a schus, which at the same time in tandem there's a chayiv. Where do you find the bedin nefashos? How do you find the bedin nefashos? Who? Give me a case where we say like even a murderer, the guy's dead already. How does it? Yeah. Oh. The Gemara will say that. The Gemara is going to dismiss us right away. The Gemara will say that. Said the Gemara. Yeah. Someone asked a question. The kavas. They said, "What would be the contrast?" Gab ben nefashos machzir l'schus. The a machzir l'chayv. That what the machzir l'schus, but not when there is a chayv involved. In other words, what when you're innocent, we will change our mind. For example, chil Shabbos, but we won't change our mind before we find the guilty. Now we find you innocent, we will impact somebody else. We do you have an example of that's how you learn Pshat the Mishnah by Maimonides. We do you have an example of that in din nefashos? Chayvas the man. Where do you ever have that a person who is found guilty of murder of a crime that deserves a capital punishment, and we find him innocent, it impacts somebody? We don't allow the one to take revenge for his family member that died. And we'll see the Gemara Makkah whether it's a shus or it's even a mitzvah. So I find that hard to comprehend. Really, we realize the guy is innocent, but we want to give the satisfaction to the goyel hadam to take revenge. We say, what? We're going to kill this innocent man. That doesn't make sense. To allow revenge, as it is, the whole idea of goyel hadam is difficult to understand. So we're going to go fight and kill an innocent person that we now realize we made a mistake in halacha. It can't be. And furthermore, my bain. The Mishnah says bain l'schus bain l'chayv. Now you tell me, even the Mishnah says that normal types is whether it's a case of I'm trying to find now innocent, a case of trying to find guilty, and you're telling me no, it's only one case, an innocence which impacts somebody else and hurts somebody else. Then what's the bain? So you want a kasha. So the Gemara says that what? That's a question. So that's how the Gemara leaves off, and yet we follow the general flow of other places. The Gemara is like a chizas. Here's a perfect example of shikol hadas. Maybe that's why Gemara even brought it here. Perfect example of shikol hadas to say that why people can make a mistake. Because if you learn this Gemara, you finish writing kashas. Even though we know that kasha doesn't mean to yufta, but still, the Gemara is not happy with our chizdah. So therefore, you decide not to follow Rav Chisda, and yet the halacha is like Rav Chisda. So this is a perfect case of shikol das where it's possible to be a Talmud Chacham and make a mistake.
But din nefashos will always be carried by Beis Din.
What do you
Will
mean?
always be considered done by Beis Din. No?
Yeah, Bessen's going to want is going to is a sentence. There's no compensation by compensation only where money matters or these kinds of things. That's right, compensation when you kill it, they got it. That's not going to happen. There's no compensation there. Why there's so many the Shulchan are so complicated and all that is this whole thing that if you're a mumche, you don't have to pay. Bad mazel. If you're not a mumche, okay, what a mumche, not a mumche. But apart from that is, what about Torah with Mishnah? This. How do you understand the Gemara here? Okay, this is a whole difference about Shikol Das. We're told about Mishnah, but it's too late. You made a mistake in the Mishnah. We say it's not halacha, but the fact is, by the time you've realized you made a big mistake, the guy went ahead and he took his animal that you said treif, and he made it, and he gave it away to the dogs. Do you have to pay that? Do we have the same dinim then? If you're not a, if you're a mumche and even a mumche by told about Mishnah, there's no psak. Do you have to pay? You have to pay. And this is, if you look in the Shach, there's so many different nuances. I think it's one of the Rishonim, maybe a meeting, like 10 different possibilities. It's just very, very complicated. Anyway, come along with Abina and here's another answer. You want to know how Nosav and Nosav Meyad, I'll tell you what the case is, Nosav and Nosav Meyad in our Mishnah, in the case of Schus. You asked the question before. If Zika is a Chayiv, so it gives another answer. Abina said, you want to know, if he says that you don't have to pay, where's the Nosav and Nosav Meyad? Where's the intervention? I'll tell you how. The Malda had a security, and when I passed into the Loiva, that you don't have to pay, I personally went and took that mashkin and I gave it to the borrower. So here, even though all of us saying you don't have to pay, but I intervened. Or the not menu. In the case that I said, it's toir, it's tummy. What's my intervention? The intervention is the agbe to prove my point. I took a sheretz, one of the 8 sherotzim, and I touched the taris. I did it personally. And tiras atame, he's one of the dayanim was very arrogant. The tiras atame, he said that this tummy is really toir. To prove my point, he took the tummy and he threw it amongst the taris, and he ruined everything. Or treif, and he ate it, and he took a piece and he ate it, or whatever. He threw it in and he mixed it in all his dishes and said, "Yeah, no problem, use it." And the guy used it all, treifed up all his dishes. It's China, and he can't kasher it now. All those things. She even made pereisiv. So instead of just telling him, he went ahead and did it. I actually know a few cases where Rabboni made these things. No, he's saying you asked the question: how is it possible? Nosav and Nosav Meyad Yud Rav Chisda said that it's the only time that it didn't is irreversible, only if he personally involved. So how do you understand Zika is a chayv? He said you don't have to pay. Or don't do anything. If you don't do anything, you didn't get involved. So Rav Chisda gave the thing, and we had this problem. I'll tell you, I can find you hechetimsis, where I personally went to prove my point. Let's say I said that this thing is kosher, when really safe. I took it and I put on your most expensive china. I did it. So it's not just I said it's kosher or it's toir. I went and I personally got involved. Now that din is irreversible. That's
he did that to prove
that my psak. This is my psak, and that's a theory. I'm saying I know cases where I was involved, where other Rabbani, whatever, passing things, which was mamish treif, and the guy treifed up his whole china, very expensive china, and it's very difficult to kasha. Unless you're lying all kinds of coolers, but it's very difficult to kasha. What do you do? Anyway, and it was taught about Mishnah because often in Shulchan Aruch, where they pass them wrong. So that's what the long shach is. For somebody in the Sameh is very short. It's a shach that goes on and on. It's very complicated. And then the other person is Sivit. It just turns your head around. Anyway, back to the Gemara. Didn't the Fashis. Okay, didn't the Fashis. We said, that you don't, it's reversal. I know once somebody came out of Bezin and he found guilty, and that person said, and we said even a Talmud, yes, I can find him innocent. So we'll just go back and reconvene the Bezin. Tamalema, it says Noki. Somebody is genuinely innocent, al taharik. Somebody is genuinely innocent, I don't want you to kill. So therefore we will return and bring it back. And so we just move. I know somebody who left the bezin and was found innocent. He's actually guilty. We don't reconvene. Tzaddik. If he was found innocent by the bezin, too late. You don't bring him back. I'm going to do Barashi, we look for the maces. When it comes to maces, exactly the opposite. If somebody says I can find Maschos, we don't reconvene. If somebody says I can find a Machai, we will reconvene. Exactly the opposite. Why? Because he says like no Rachmanas, and somebody who's a maces who's trying to seduce or incite other people who are theirs. It doesn't matter what the outcome of his hasasa is. The etzim inyan that he's maces is already an aveda. That's why Dibia Rabba, Dibia Talmud is not a tainer for this maces. Rav Kahana, because we don't care about the outcome. It's the etzem inyan that you're trying to convince someone to be oivel avodah zarah. Rav Kahana learns from another pasuk that Mechi Horeg Tahagenu. It says of the Horeg, it says a double Horeg by a maces. Therefore, we have to it says Ki Horeg Tahagenu. Why double Horeg? I don't care what the situation is, we always try to find him guilty. What about Chayav Golyas? What about Chayav Golyas? Is it treated like Din in the Fashis, and therefore we'll always reconvene to try to help you out? Or it's not like Din in the Fashis? So Mara said we have Xer Shabbat. Ashevilonad Roitzeach. It says by somebody who committed a crime of murder, it says you must have Roitzeach. And it says by Chayav Golyas that the Roitzeach should run this. So we have Roitzeach, they have the same din. Chayav Malchus. We can actually learn in a big machlekes we're showing in Malchus whether the whole idea of Golyas is kapora or einish. Whether it's like because if you learn it's like an einish, then why should it be any different than like a mitzvah? But if you learn it's a kapara, you would say it's a whole different. We're not punishing him; it's a kapara for him for what he did. That's when we use Xer Shabbat. It's Tzech. Chayav Malchus. What about Chayav Malchus? How do you know them? Ask we learn out Russia. It says by Din of Fas Russia Lamus, and by Chayav Malchus it says you being Hakkas of Russia. We had a machlek before Rabba and Abaya. Where do you learn out that Malchus? We said Malchus Misa Medis there, and Rabbi uses Xer Shabbat Russia, and Rabba says Asvara. Malchus is like Misa. So Tosis try to explain that Abai is right, but the others sometimes it depends. If it's to talk about the etzeminian of Malchus, we learn Russia, but when it talks about, for example, Kama B'Drabane, which is not talking about the Malchus part of it, it's talking about whether you pay money as well if you committed a crime that deserves lashes and money. Then the Rabbi says, I cannot learn from this Gershava Rosh. I need some other drasha. Time we learn. Go even nine asher. It says, hey, Rosh. And yeah, but you don't bring it back in order to criminate them. You know, when we say we don't reverse the halacha, only if even towards our mission, we're not going to reverse the halacha. But if it's mamish against a pasuk in the Torah that's dukin, a moide to the pasuk in the Torah, then it's a different story. It's not a psak. Therefore, you're not reconvening. You never finished the court case in the first place. But if you make a mistake against a open pasuk in the Torah, even Sduk can agree, there's no argument, then your psak is not a psak at all. So Bezin never completed their things. It's not a question of reversing their psak. There's no psak to reverse. Nothing happened. I mean, I told about Mishnah, it's still a psak, but it's the wrong psak. So you reverse it. But a Torah, but is not a psak. So therefore, it's not a question of reversing. So what about Toya V'Noyef V'Na'efes? Mao. They made a mistake about someone who committed adultery or different kinds of arayas, incest, whatever it is, something to do with adultery. And what happens then? Is it? Do we say that it's reversible or not? You made a mistake. You finally got innocent. Now you want to make it. Is it reversible or not? So he said, "I understand your question." Amalei said to him another beautiful saying: "At the moitach yakid, by the time you light the fire, zil kais kara, go ahead and cut your pumpkin to your gourd, but solely roast it." In other words, we're talking about this inyan. What I just tell you that anything with dukim amayda, there's no psak. No, everyone agrees that you're not commit adultery or arayas. It's from Fashion the Torah. So what's your question? If you If you Tobenoiv, you can face go back. Why? Because it's not a sakaro. It's something that's looking made. But the Mishnah says when it comes to din in the fashists, you don't go back from chayva to schul. But you're telling me that, and it seems like any case of capital crime, not just chil Shabbos or murder, even arayas, every case of arayas they agree with. If every case of arayas they agree with, then when is it a case that you cannot be chayzer by arayas? The Mishnah says you cannot change your mind in any case of capital crimes. So by arayis, to do with immorality or debauchery, when do you have a case where you cannot reverse it? Well, you can. Where do we learn now that if you don't do it the conventional way, your relations with somebody that's illegal, that's forbidden for you? We learn that mishkave isha, mishkave in plural, conventional and non-conventional. That's a real drasha. And Taisa already asked, what are you talking about? So Taisa said that they're arguing about hara. In other words, they only started a relationship, hara, whether there's an avail or not. Everybody can intervene. Who's everybody? It sounds like everybody means even the witnesses themselves. The witnesses have found this person guilty can turn around and say, yeah, but we think that Apitini doesn't have to pay because this and this halacha. So if that's the case, name a masnisin Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda must be the author of Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabban, not the Rabban. What's the story? The time we learned the aid echad leyana benefit says that a single aid should not testify against a person. Now, we said so many times in the Torah that Apishnaim aid. What do you need this pasuk? So we dash from there. Bein l'schus bein l'chayv. They cannot even defend that an aid cannot turn around and try to defend the person that he testified against. Rabbi Yehuda says yes. The very aid that went ahead and testified against this defendant can go ahead now and say, but I can advocate on his behalf. So therefore, our Mishnah, obviously, when he said that everybody can be Rabbi Yehuda, which is a problem because the Rabban argue. Amar Papa, no. When our Mishnah said that everybody could say, we're not talking about Eidim. The Echad ben Atamid dir Hakol, nothing to do with that machlekes. Our Mishnah talking about that any of the students that in the Fashas can only get involved with schus and not l'chayva, and but by din imamanis, Tamid can get involved. My time and what's the reason? What's the story of Rabbi Yehuda? Why can the aid himself turn around and testify? What's the next word? Lamus cannot incriminate. Lamus would know he cannot get involved. If the very aid wants to defend the person, of course, oina. Remember the whole idea of Yitzil and all that. But Rabbanan says that Shlokish, no. Rabbanan whole like says Shlokish, why he cannot either way? But should the Merzik and the Gay if he's trying to defend the person, maybe he realizes that his aidus is false or that he's kibbutz and he's starting to feel guilty. Now we have a rule, Kiva Shehigid, Shuva Magid. We'll have later the whole story, sad story, Shem B'Shatach. You cannot change your mind. So therefore, he thinks the way he'll get out of it is to pacify his guilt. I'll find somewhere halacha that this person is innocent under the circumstances. But what do they do with Pasuk Lamas? It seems that the only thing that the eight cannot do is to advocate to kill the person, but to defend him he can. He talked about Talmidim. They can only find schusim, they cannot fight chayk. If one of the witnesses is actually we don't listen at all. I don't care what. You cannot get involved because we think he's in a gay aidus, is trying to mitigate what he did. A student, he says, yes, a student says, look, this guy, by murder, I want to find him guilty, but don't listen to him. Only lamas we don't listen, but if the Talmud says I want to find him a schus, you can.